你外婆要死嘛，给她就死嘛，给他们留到检察过来我就死，这要不我就卡死给去，让我再去死。我话把人家家好多条命到嘛，我还晓得讲我警示，不警示瓜也是7、8洗呀，也是7、8洗。
In China, family is incredibly important. Family units are made up of cousins, aunts and uncles, grandparents, great-grandparents, parents, and many children, with an average of 6 children per household and sometimes even more. Ancestors are honored highly and believed to watch over their house even after their death, and it is up to the family to ensure that the honor of the name is upheld. The family line is passed on by the husband, causing parents to hope to have a son so they can pass on the family name. Children are cherished, beloved, and supposed to help with everything, even taking on the family business when they are older. However, in September 1979, all of that began changing. Because of the exponential population growth, a lack of resources became a real problem. In an attempt to prevent more starvation, the government encouraged families to have fewer children. In 1982, the government stopped encouraging fewer children. It became part of China's constitution. Although many Western countries know this policy as the one-child policy, China called it the family planning policy. The family planning policy changed China's population, orphanage inhabitants, family mindsets, and the rates of adoptions, sterilizations, job occupations, and female birth. These changes all worked towards a turning point in China's history by affecting the culture and population through government decisions and the response of the people. Although everyone was affected, families were affected most, especially the change in values of human life and gender preference within the household. Sons were honored and valued much higher than girls and would be given the best food and education. All their needs would be placed above their sisters, trying to give them the best chance for success. Because the idea of honor being brought to the family was stressed at such a high standard, families began to overlook the value of having daughters. Because they wanted to maintain the family name and daughters would marry into a different family and become part of that household, the family name would not be passed on, and the parents on the husband's side would even be called a more respectful name than the parents on the wife's side. For a time, families could have 2 children if their first child was a daughter, but it quickly changed to only 1. Baby girls became so devalued to the point where they would be thrown out with the trash.
Many times, parents would use sonograms to determine the gender of the child. If it was a girl, they would often abort it so they could try again for a son. However, if it was a son, they would keep it. Trying to cut back on the loss of baby girls' lives, the government made it illegal to have a sonogram. Sadly, this did not save more lives because families would keep the children to term. If it was a boy, they would keep it. However, if it was a girl, they would leave it out on the streets to die. Once a family already had a child but became pregnant again, they would be forced to abort the child. If they were able to choose to keep the child, they would be given an immense fine and forced to be sterilized.
人口我就这么有统计的，我家上的这个，我手上结扎，专门搞结扎有5-6万，我手上搞结扎有5-6万，引产有5-6万，个个统计，我有查过噻，引产噻，特别是引产。引产打死我噻！你看我不新鲜过，7、8个月个出来都要哭个噻。
Although many people went along with the policy, many found ways around it.
它是中国的内蒙古那个地方，所以我们2个人就都共同在北京。那国家政策来管理我们的时候，就是我的老家就以为我嫁到了内蒙古，然后会由内蒙古的一个负责计划生育的政府的部门来管理我。那但是内蒙古那边呢，我自己的户口还是在山东，所以内蒙古就以为我是属于山东地区来管理，所以很感恩，我觉得就是我相当于是属于一个山东的地方，以为我是由内蒙古来管理，然后内蒙古那边会是以为我是由山东来管理，所以就没有人管理我，所以我才有机会，就是在没有任何政策的压力之下，就是生了第2、第3还有第4个孩子。
Many parents found a way around the policy in similar ways. Traveling to different provinces, they made it seem like they were only having their first child. People would also hide their child until after it was born, not reporting the baby's birth. The problem was that because the government did not know they existed, they were not put into the family's hukou. a family's registration. Without a hukou, the child was denied fundamental needs such as medical care, education, and employment. In these ways, many people were able to have more children but still avoid the immense fines that would leave them penniless and on the streets. Because of the fines, many families would be forced to put their child in a basket on the street, in marketplaces or anywhere around the town. Many of these families put them out in a desperate attempt to keep their child from dying, hoping that they would be picked up by someone able to either pay the fines or provide for their child just so they could live. Much of the time, these abandoned yet loved children starved to death. Many parents would often watch over their babies constantly, hoping that someone would take them in. Unfortunately, when the unavoidable would happen, they would mournfully bury their child. Despite many of the babies dying with people looking on apathetically, some people would take pity on their children, taking them to orphanages for small price per child as a reward.
那个送早的过多年噻，我还想着你吧，也是干。
妈哟，还不想，想有死的办法的，死啊才不晓得嘛。
就等你送完了以后嘛，跟你娃一点的消息，
妈，
是的嘛娃。
那个给我放消息出来。
拜呀。
拜，你晓得给屋去做事了，给我放消息，恁屋里都那个给放消息，你要去屋，如果条件好，你去屋转来噻。
行。
是吧？给讲个噻。这快都30年了，2年30年了，还好快嘞。
For a time, the government went as far as putting people in jail for taking these children to orphanages and labeled it as trafficking the children. Yet later, they began to encourage it. These orphanages would then allow international families to adopt a child that had been put out to die. Thousands of babies were adopted by families all over the world, but mostly by families living in America. Although the government was making money from all the fees from adoption, they continued to use propaganda to get people to stop having more children. The most told excuse for not having children was that they were expensive, too much work, and were a bad influence on society. Many people, especially the younger generation, believed the propaganda told by the government and did not want children. When women were pregnant, there were simple ways for them to abort the child. Afterward, people would continue with their lives normally. This led to a rapid decrease in the population, leaving businesses with open jobs and a need for more employees. As factories and large businesses failed to maintain enough employees for the company to continue running, they were forced to shut down. With many businesses closing, the economy began to decrease drastically, which the government responded to by lifting the one-child policy on January 1st, 2016, allowing China's families to have 2 children. Despite this, young people still did not want to have children, causing the total fertility rate to drop further from 6.5 to 1.6. With so few children, the population balance between old and young became increasingly unbalanced. With so many only children caring for 4 older people, grandparents and parents are still found either living together or with their children and grandchildren. Since the older generation expects their children and grandchildren to take care of them, there is incredible pressure on their children to succeed to support the family.
In China, the pressure for grades is on everybody. The pressure to succeed is definitely higher for the only children.
This also causes a large deficiency in workers, and many businesses are forced to shut down. Not only are there less and less children being born, but because of how many of the people wanted to have boys, there are now very few girls. After one census, it was found that approximately 12.8 million fewer females were born from 1980 and 2000 than would be expected if China experienced normal sex ratios at birth and gender-neutral mortality rates. Because of the severe imbalance between the numbers of men and women, there is a new expectation for women to marry young and have multiple children. Women are now highly encouraged to prioritize getting married and having children over having aspirations in life, and any woman unmarried by their mid-20s is labeled as 剩女, or leftover women. Instead of having the number of children they bear restricted, women are being encouraged to have many children so that the imbalance between old and young people and men and women is alleviated. The one-child policy completely changed what family cultures are and the value of children, especially in the younger population. Despite the many horrors that occurred during the one-child policy, the government has seen the mistakes that it made and is now constantly trying to compensate for them.